Look who managed to survive long enough to hear this. Yes, you. The one they've been dissecting in their private meetings. The one whose name keeps surfacing in conversations you were never invited to join. The one they claim to have forgotten, yet somehow can't stop analyzing. Sit down. Because what I'm about to tell you will dismantle every comfortable lie they've been feeding you. They finally cracked. They broke under the pressure. And when they did, they spilled everything. Every whispered strategy, every coordinated move, every calculated attempt to make you question your own mind. You want to know what's really been happening behind those closed doors while you were busy trying to heal, move forward, and convince yourself you were just being paranoid? You weren't. You were absolutely right. And it's far worse than you ever imagined. But also, in a strange way, so much better. Because now you finally have proof that you were never the problem. You never were. Let's start from the beginning. From the moment they realized you weren't going to break the way they had planned, there was a meeting, a coordinated discussion where your name was the only topic on the agenda. Yes, really? They sat around, analyzing you, picking apart your every move, trying to understand why their usual tactics had stopped working. Why you didn't react with rage when they expected it. Why you went silent when they anticipated a breakdown. Why you walked away when they thought you'd come crawling back. That's when the cracks began to show. Because people who thrive on control crumble the moment they can't predict you. Their entire sense of power was built on knowing exactly how you'd respond. Which buttons to push. How much pressure to apply before you'd fold. But you changed the code. You rewired yourself in silence. Suddenly their manual became useless. One of them finally said it aloud, a moment of exhaustion mixed with something almost like respect. They said your name like it weighed them down. Like carrying it for months had drained them. And then came the confession. We thought we were dealing with someone fragile. Someone we could shape. Someone who needed us. But every time we pushed, they didn't bend. They vanished. And when they came back, they were different, harder, unreachable. We spent months trying to find the breaking point, running scenarios, testing reactions. And there was nothing. No weakness to exploit, no vulnerability to weaponize, no guilt to trigger. It was like fighting a shadow that learned to fight back without ever throwing a punch. That's what they called you, a shadow. Not because you disappeared, but because you learned to exist beyond their reach. You became immune to their weapons, resistant to their poison, allergic to their manipulation. The revelation of coordinated sabotage. And here's where it turns dark. The kind of revelation that makes your blood run cold. They admitted to planting people in your life. Those chance encounters that seemed too convenient. Those new friendships that developed too fast. Those helpful strangers who appeared right when you were vulnerable. Some of them weren't coincidences. They were assignments, scouts disguised as supporters, eyes wrapped in sympathy, informants dressed as friends. Their mission was simple: get close. Earn your trust. Report back. Find the wounds that hadn't healed, the fears they could exploit, the dreams they could dangle like bait. But here's the poetic justice in all of it. Most of those people came back empty-handed. They came back confused, frustrated, some even quietly shaken. A few of them were changed, not because they intended to be, but because being in your presence, even under false pretenses, exposed them to something they weren't equipped to handle. Your authenticity, your calm strength, your refusal to perform just to be validated. It got under their skin and infected them. Some of them started questioning their own choices, their compromises, their roles and systems built to crush people like you. Even as they played their part, a few of them began to see the rot from the inside. But let's dig into the darker truth, the part that confirms you weren't imagining any of it. The coldness was coordinated, strategic. They had a plan, a documented method for dealing with you. Step 1 was isolation. Cutting off your support, making you doubt your own perceptions, and turning mutual connections against you until you looked like the problem. Step 2 was provocation. Pushing every button they could find, baiting you into reacting so they could call your emotions instability. Step 3 was narrative control. Seizing the story before you could. Twisting every move into proof of flaws they invented. Step 4, the final act, was replacement. Filling your absence with new faces to remind you that you were dispensable, forgettable, replaceable. They executed this plan like clockwork, ticking off each phase with the precision of a corporate rollout. And for a while it almost worked. It would have broken most people. But you weren't most people. You were the glitch in their system. The variable they couldn't predict, the outcome that refused to obey the formula. When isolation didn't crush you, when you began to thrive in solitude instead of collapsing, that's when fear took root in them. They'd expected loneliness to send you crawling back, desperate to make peace on their terms. But instead you built a new life from the ashes. You found peace in the silence they thought would punish you. You uncovered strength in the emptiness they designed to break you. Watching you bloom in the wasteland they created destroyed them more than any confrontation ever could. One of them finally cracked, admitting bitterly, "We gave them nothing and they built everything. We stripped away their support and they became their own foundation." How do you fight someone who doesn't need you to exist? That question lingered in the air like smoke, suffocating them with the realization that their power was never real. It only worked because you let them believe it. The moment you stopped pretending they had control, their empire disintegrated. The truth of paranoia and gaslighting. Now here's where it gets both disturbing and validating. For every moment you felt paranoid, every time your instincts told you something didn't add up, you were right. They didn't just act in sync by coincidence. They rehearsed it. Before every interaction, every appearance, every shared space, they aligned their stories. They agreed on what version of reality to present, what parts of your character to emphasize, and which truths to erase. It wasn't paranoia. It was conspiracy, real, deliberate, and rehearsed. They practiced their concern, perfected their disappointment, and even staged their innocence when you confronted them. The most twisted part? They convinced themselves they were doing it for you. They told themselves that manipulating your perception was protection, that controlling your narrative was love, that systematically dismantling your reality was somehow justified by their belief that they knew what was best for you. The narcissism embedded in that kind of logic is staggering. The sheer arrogance it takes to believe someone else's truth needs editing. But you felt it, didn't you? Every time a story didn't line up. Every time a reaction sounded rehearsed. Every time the atmosphere in a room changed the moment you walked in. Your instincts screamed the truth while they harmonized their lies. And yet they called you paranoid for noticing. Sensitive for sensing. Unstable for refusing to accept their fabricated version of reality. That's the cruelty of coordinated gaslighting. It targets the very compass you rely on to find the truth. They wanted you to lose faith in yourself, to doubt your intuition, to mistrust your own perception more than you mistrusted them. And for a while they succeeded. You started questioning your memories, second-guessing your experiences, apologizing for reactions that were completely valid responses to their deliberate manipulation. But then something inside you shifted. You stopped seeking validation from them and started trusting the quiet authority of your own nervous system. You began believing your body's truth more than their performance. The power of silence and indifference. The person who finally broke, the one who confessed everything in a moment of guilt and fatigue, revealed the exact moment the group realized they had lost control of you. It was when you stopped explaining yourself. When you no longer defended your choices. When you quit justifying your boundaries or debating your own character. They said your silence terrified them because it meant you had transcended their reach. When you stopped caring what they thought, their control disintegrated. You became immune to their approval, allergic to their judgment, utterly indifferent to their opinions. And that indifference, calm, deliberate, unshakable, became your greatest weapon. They threw everything at you to pull you back in. Messengers bearing false apologies. Olive branches wrapped in thorns. Tempting offers that required you to betray yourself. But you met it all with the composure of someone watching paint dry. Not out of apathy but out of deep clarity. You finally understood that engaging with them meant poisoning your own soul. And here's what they said about that transformation. About the version of you that rose from the wreckage they created. They said you'd become unrecognizable, not in appearance but in energy. The eagerness to please was gone. The need for validation had vanished entirely. Like an extinct species that once thrived in the wild but could no longer survive in the new ecosystem you created for yourself. The willingness to shrink, to fold yourself into smaller shapes just to fit into their comfort zones, was gone without a trace. They said it was like watching someone peel off a skin they didn't even know they'd been forced to wear. A costume stitched together from expectations, guilt, and manipulation. And when that false identity finally fell away, what emerged underneath was something raw, unfiltered, and entirely untouchable. They couldn't manipulate it, couldn't charm it, couldn't intimidate it, couldn't use it. It was beyond their reach. One of them, in a voice that shook with both awe and bitterness, called you impenetrable. Another muttered, unreachable. A third one, grasping for language, called it evolution. But they said it like it was a curse, because your evolution highlighted everything they refused to confront about themselves. Your transformation forced them to see their own stagnation. Your growth exposed their decay. Your freedom revealed the cages they still defended as necessary. You didn't just step out of their system, you shattered the illusion that it was inescapable. You proved that the bars were imaginary, that the locks were illusions, that the guards they feared were nothing but frightened people clinging to borrowed authority. And nothing ignited their rage as much as watching someone walk freely through an open door they'd spent years convincing themselves was locked. You became living proof that their entire hierarchy of control was a myth. Every time they whispered about you, every time they tried to rewrite your story, they did it to avoid the truth your existence made undeniable. You showed that liberation was always possible. You revealed that their rules were just chains made of fear. The haunting of the absent source. And now, even as they pretend not to care, they can't stop watching. They study you from a distance, silently, obsessively. They scroll through your posts, dissect your updates, and ask mutual connections carefully crafted questions disguised as idle curiosity. They tell themselves it's harmless, that they're just checking in, but deep down they're looking for signs that you failed. That you've come undone without their influence. But what they find instead is unbearable to them. You're thriving. You're at peace. You're building without their input. Growing without their guidance. Succeeding without their validation. Every time you reach a new milestone, every time you smile without them, every time you find joy in your solitude, it slices through their delusion like glass. Because each one of your victories, big or small, is living evidence that they were never necessary, never helpful, never anything but obstacles wearing the mask of support. The truth gnaws at them. In quiet moments they can't escape. Because if you're better off without them, what does that say about their worth? If your peace flourishes in their absence, what does that reveal about their presence? And if your strength grew only after cutting them loose, what exactly were they providing besides weight and distraction? These questions follow them like ghosts, creeping into their minds at night, haunting their conversations, poisoning their attempts at self-justification. They scroll through your life in silence, trying to convince themselves you just got lucky, that you're faking it, that your confidence is a mask. But deep down they know the truth. You didn't get lucky. You got free. You were never the problem. You were the host. And they were the parasite accusing you of being sick. They were the infection pretending to be the cure. The inventory of quiet cruelties. The confession, the part that spilled out in that moment of weary honesty, revealed every hidden weapon they used. Every quiet, cruel thing you once mistook for coincidence. They admitted to withholding information they knew you needed, then pretending it slipped their mind. They confessed to scheduling important events at times they knew you couldn't attend, only to express disappointment later and frame you as unreliable. They praised you publicly, smiling through their teeth, while whispering poison about you in private. They pretended to support your dreams all while working behind the scenes to undermine them. They'd ask for your opinion, then dismiss it the second it left your lips. They'd seek your advice, ignore it completely, and then twist the blame back onto you when their own decisions imploded. Each tactic was subtle, deliberate, and designed to corrode you slowly. Not enough to expose them, but enough to make you question yourself. They didn't need to destroy you outright. They just needed to convince you to doubt your own instincts, to make you think your strength was arrogance, your awareness was paranoia, your boundaries were cruelty. Every maneuver was psychological warfare disguised as concern. Every forgetting, every misunderstanding, every accidental slight was a move in a strategy meant to make you shrink, to depend, and apologize for existing too boldly. But the beauty of it, the poetic justice, is that every single one of those tactics backfired. The more they tried to weaken you, the more self-reliant you became. The more they withheld, the more you learned to find what you needed within yourself. The more they pushed for control, the more you realized you didn't need them. Their plan was to erode your foundation. Instead, they revealed you were your own foundation all along. You stopped looking for support from the same hands that built your cage. And when you finally stepped out, they were left behind, choking on the dust of their own illusion of power, watching you walk away, unbroken, unstoppable, and untouchable. The highest form of psychological warfare. The genius of their manipulation was how perfectly they weaponized subtlety. If you ever dared to confront them, they always had an escape hatch, a shield made of reasonable explanations. Every calculated slight, every cold dismissal, every forgotten promise came wrapped in plausible deniability. They would look you dead in the eye and say, "It was just a misunderstanding. You're reading too much into it. I didn't mean it that way." And when that didn't calm you down, they twist the knife deeper. "You're too sensitive. Too defensive. You always assume the worst." Suddenly your pain became the problem. Your clarity became overreaction. Your intuition became evidence of instability. It's one of the highest forms of psychological warfare, turning your accurate perception of harm into a symptom of the harm itself. They made you question your reality by dressing their cruelty in charm, coding malice in politeness, and masking hostility as concern. They conditioned you to doubt the one tool that could have protected you: your intuition. And when you tried to name what was happening, they used that truth as ammunition to destroy your credibility. It wasn't an accident. It was design, a deliberate inversion of reality where their abuse became invisible and your awareness became the crime. But you didn't stay blind forever. You stopped accepting their explanations at face value and started collecting evidence. You started documenting every message, every contradiction, every coincidental slight that didn't add up. You began keeping receipts, screenshots, notes, timestamps, anything that could make sense of the madness. What once looked random began forming a pattern, and that pattern was undeniable. The chaos wasn't accidental. The inconsistency wasn't confusion. It was strategy. And here's the revelation that validates every sleepless night, every moment you questioned your sanity. They admitted it. They confessed that the reactions they provoked were intentional. They pushed your buttons until you finally snapped just so they could point at the fallout and say, "See, this is what we mean." They stayed calm while you rightfully called out their manipulation so they could brand your justified anger as unhinged. They maintained icy composure while you tried to defend yourself, framing your humanity as hysteria. It was theater, carefully staged, masterfully rehearsed, scripted to make you the villain in the drama they were directing. And the moment you stopped playing your assigned role, their production fell apart. When you stopped reacting, when you refused to take the bait, when you no longer rose to their provocations, the entire system glitched. You became unreadable, and unreadable meant uncontrollable. They tried escalating, inventing new lies, pressing harder on old wounds. But nothing worked. You no longer supplied the emotional fuel their narrative needed. That silence, that calm detachment terrified them. It was the moment they realized you weren't gone physically. You were gone psychologically. And unreachable means untouchable. Untouchable means they lost. The final confession and the detonation. The meeting where the truth finally cracked open, that infamous gathering where the mask slipped, happened because one of them simply couldn't carry the weight anymore. The effort of constant deception had started to rot them from the inside. They were tired. Tired of pretending. Tired of coordinating lies. Tired of maintaining a moral high ground that didn't exist. In that exhaustion, someone broke the unspoken rule of silence and said something that froze everyone in place. "We've been acting like we're the victims of someone who never actually hurt us. We've been treating them like a threat. But the real threat was how they made us feel about ourselves." That single sentence was a detonation. It ripped the mask off everything. And once one person cracked, the others began to unravel too. The confession started slow, awkward laughter, nervous glances. But soon the truth spilled faster than anyone could stop it. They admitted the jealousy they dressed up as worry. The envy they had disguised as constructive criticism. The insecurity they projected as concern for your behavior. They revealed the resentment simmering beneath every backhanded compliment, every forced smile, every false apology. Your success didn't wound them because it harmed them. It wounded them because it exposed their mediocrity. Your joy didn't offend them because it excluded them. It offended them because it reminded them of their own misery. Your peace was an insult to their chaos. Your boundaries were an affront to their entitlement. You weren't difficult to love. You were impossible to control. And that distinction changes everything. They admitted that what they feared most wasn't your anger, your absence, or even your independence. It was your example. They were terrified that your freedom might become contagious. That other people might see you walking unbothered and realize they too could walk away. They feared your refusal to settle would expose how much they had settled. They feared your standards would make their compromises visible. They feared your authenticity would highlight their performance. And deep down, that's what every act of sabotage was really about. The random cruelty, the unprovoked jabs, the unnecessary gossip, all of it was driven by fear. Fear that your light would reveal their shadows. Fear that your truth would dismantle their fiction. Fear that your wholeness would make their brokenness so undeniable. They didn't want to destroy you because they hated you. They wanted to destroy you because you made them see themselves. The house of cards collapses. That's the irony of it all. They never had power over you. They only had power over the version of you that still cared what they thought. Once you stopped seeking their validation, the entire house of cards collapsed. And now they're left with nothing but the echo of what they lost: control. They can't define you or rewrite you anymore. And that loss haunts them. Because while they were busy scripting your downfall, you were quietly writing your resurrection. You became the living embodiment of everything they had told themselves was impossible. The ideals they mocked as naive. The standards they dismissed as unrealistic. The peace they swore didn't exist. You became all of it. You didn't just talk about self-respect, healing, or freedom. You lived it. Every single day you woke up and quietly proved that it was possible to exist without bending, without begging, without betraying yourself. And that shook them to their core. Because your existence dismantled their excuses. If you could live authentically after everything they'd done to you, then they had no defense left for their own stagnation. You represented proof. Proof that the prison of dysfunction was never locked. Proof that suffering wasn't noble. Proof that peace wasn't weakness. And that proof was unbearable for them. If you could rebuild after walking away, what did that say about their claim that escape was impossible? If you could choose self-respect over validation, why were they still seeking approval from the same systems that drained them? If you could find peace in solitude, what did that reveal about their need for constant chaos? Your life became a mirror. And mirrors are dangerous to people who spend their lives avoiding reflection. You didn't just live differently. You invalidated their entire belief structure, because their identity was built on limitation. They told themselves that cruelty was just how life works. That unhappiness was normal. That control was love. You exposed every one of those lies by thriving outside of them. You became an existential threat, not to their safety but to their excuses. You forced them to confront the possibility that they'd been wrong, that the dysfunction they defended as survival was actually self-sabotage. Most people trapped in toxic systems cling to them because they need the illusion of helplessness. They tell themselves they can't leave, can't change, can't do better because can't is safer than won't. But you broke that illusion. You showed that it's a choice. You walked out of the same fire they're still sitting in and came out clean. That kind of freedom is threatening. You weren't fighting them. You were outgrowing them. And outgrowing people who depend on your submission feels to them like betrayal. The predictable failure of the replacement strategy. Now let's get into the replacement strategy. The most predictable play in the narcissist's handbook, and yet the one they thought would save them. When you started pulling away, when your responses got colder, when your boundaries became solid walls instead of open doors, they panicked because control needs proximity. So they scrambled to recreate what they were losing. They recruited replacements. People who could fill your space, echo your energy, mimic your role. They did it quietly, strategically introducing these new figures with carefully crafted timing and glowing praise. They arranged encounters, built coincidences, engineered moments meant to make you notice. The goal was twofold. First, they wanted to punish you, to show you that you were replaceable, that your absence didn't matter, that life went on just fine without you. Second, they needed to soothe their own fear of loss by proving they could replicate you. To them, you weren't a person, you were a function, a source, a utility. So they thought they could simply swap you out and keep the machine running. But here's what they didn't expect. It didn't work. Because you were never a role. You were a presence. You were substance, not decoration. You were authenticity in a world of mimicry, depth in a room full of performance. They thought they could copy your function, but what they didn't understand is that your value was never in what you did. It was in who you were. They could imitate your behavior, your tone, your habits, but not your essence. Because essence can't be taught, can't be faked, and can't be replaced. The replacements weren't bad people. They were just in over their heads. Perfectly fine on their own, but woefully inadequate to fill a void shaped like you. And soon that became obvious to everyone involved. The energy didn't feel the same. The conversations didn't flow. The dynamic felt hollow, off balance, forced. The replacements began to crumble under the weight of expectations they never agreed to meet. Some tried harder. Others left quietly. But the truth was unavoidable. You can't replicate authenticity. You can't clone a soul. Your absence became louder than your presence ever was. Every attempt to replace you just amplified the reality that no one else fit. They could find new company but not new connection. They could find new distractions but not new depth. They could mimic your warmth but not your fire. You had become an irreplaceable archetype in their lives. Not because you were perfect but because you were real. And realness is something people addicted to control can't reproduce. They thought they could swap you out like a part in a machine. But humans aren't machinery. And you especially, you weren't built for replacement. You were built for resonance. You didn't just occupy space. You altered it. You didn't just contribute energy. You reshaped it. When you walked out, they didn't just lose a person. They lost balance, inspiration, grounding, reflection. All the things they pretended to despise but secretly depended on. And now they live with that emptiness. They'll never admit it out loud, but it's there in the way they check up on you from fake accounts, in the way they ask mutual friends about you with rehearsed nonchalance, in the way they still compare every new connection to you and wonder why it doesn't feel right. They're haunted not just by your memory, but by the truth your existence proved. Regret, guilt, and final validation. You showed them that everything they called unrealistic was real, and that every excuse they hid behind was just fear in disguise. And that's the part that cuts deepest. Because it's not your success that torments them. It's not even your happiness. It's the unbearable realization that they could have chosen the same freedom but didn't. You didn't destroy them. You just stopped pretending their cage was home. And now, every time they see you living freely, confidently, peacefully, it reminds them that they built their own prison, locked themselves inside, and called it love. They're dealing with regret now, though they'll likely never say it out loud. Pride won't let them. Admitting regret means admitting you were right. And that's something people like them would rather choke on than confess. But it's there, knowing quietly at them in the moments when the noise fades, when the distractions stop working, when they're left alone with their thoughts. You can hear it in the cracks of their voices. See it in the way they overcompensate for indifference. The truth leaks through no matter how tightly they try to seal it. One of them slipped during the final confession, when exhaustion finally overpowered performance. They said almost under their breath, "I think we made a mistake. I think we destroyed something rare because we couldn't handle how it made us feel." That single sentence hung in the air like a ghost, heavy with realization and too late to matter. It didn't undo anything. It didn't erase the damage. Didn't wash away the cruelty. Didn't heal the scars. But it confirmed what you had always known, what your intuition had been screaming long before the confession. You were never the problem. You were the mirror. And mirrors are dangerous things to people who live in denial. When faced with a reflection that exposes the truth, they only have two options: evolve or destroy the source of exposure. They chose destruction. They tried to shatter you instead of facing themselves. But here's the cruel irony. When you break a mirror, the reflection doesn't disappear. It just fragments. Now they're surrounded by the shattered glass of their own choices, cutting themselves on the pieces of truth they tried to bury. Every shard reflects what they didn't want to see, that destroying you didn't fix them. It just left them bleeding in the wreckage of their own avoidance. They're still the same people with the same insecurities, the same bitterness, the same hollow justifications. The only difference now is the guilt, the awareness that they ruined something pure out of cowardice, that they had something genuine in their hands and they destroyed it out of envy, fear, and pride. And that guilt festers, not as loud remorse but as quiet torment, the kind that creeps in at 2 a.m. when no one's watching and no performance can hide it. They'll replay conversations, imagine different endings, tell themselves stories to dull the ache. But deep down, they know they lost something they'll never find again: the reclamation. But here's the turning point. Your moment of absolute reclamation. Their regret does not define your redemption. You don't need their confession to validate your truth. You don't need their guilt to prove your pain was real. You don't need their admission to confirm your experience. Their breakdown, their spilling of secrets, their exposure of tactics. It's fascinating, maybe even satisfying, but it's not essential. Because you already did the work long before they unraveled. You already dissected the betrayal, processed the grief, learned the lessons, and rebuilt yourself from the ground up. You've already become the version of yourself they tried to destroy. Their confession doesn't mark your healing. It merely timestamps their realization. You were healing before they spoke. You were thriving before they cracked. You were free long before they ever acknowledged what they'd done. Their regret doesn't change your story. It only confirms it. Everything they've revealed now is just evidence of what your body, your intuition, and your quiet awareness always knew. You didn't need proof. Your nervous system told you the truth when your mind was still trying to rationalize. You felt it in the unease that never left you, in the exhaustion that came from pretending not to see. This confession is not a revelation. It's validation. It's confirmation of what your soul already understood. You were always right. They were always lying. And here's the immutable law: truth doesn't die in darkness. It can be buried for a while, suffocated under layers of denial and performance, but it never stays hidden. Lies demand constant upkeep. Truth requires none. Lies are fragile. They need effort, rehearsal, and cooperation. Truth just waits silently, patiently, inevitably until the moment it surfaces. Just like this. Thank you for listening to this message. We hope this story of survival, freedom, and self-validation resonates with you. Remember to trust your own instincts, embrace your boundaries, and know that your healing and eventual triumph are entirely independent of their regret or approval. We offer a closing prayer for strength and faith. Dear Father, I pray for the growth of my faith. Help me trust you even when physical evidence is lacking. Let me believe in your perpetual presence, knowing you will never harm me. I understand that your thoughts for me are thoughts of prosperity and not harm, to give me a good future. Thank you, gracious and eternal Father, for always listening to my voice. I offer up this prayer to you in the name of Jesus. Amen. Thank you, Jesus, for your love and provision. I am grateful for your presence in my life and the abundance you bring. If this resonated with you, please engage with the content and share it with those who need to hear this message. Leave a comment below about your journey and how you are preparing for your own triumphant return. If you'd like to support our work and help spread God's word and bring hope to others, please consider a contribution. Keep shining brightly and embrace your destiny with courage. Blessings to all the beautiful souls from the God Connection.